Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Philma. Kenzie. Philma, welcome. Was that a long enough pause?
I was considering whether to interject, but thought best to let you run with it.
That's right.
Interrupting. You run out of steam like an overexcited toddler. It's always one of the best approaches.
Also, we know that on this show, interrupting is my responsibility. Don't you come butting into my bailiwick, mister. Well, welcome to this week's episode. I'm here, Phil's here, and UFC 260 happened. That's what we're going to talk about. At the end of last week's show, I mentioned that we were looking forward to, I may not have used exactly that phrase, the Till versus Vettori card. Although the more I think of it, I think that's a pretty cool main event, actually. Vettori seems well suited to bring a good fight out of there until. But that's for next week, because we actually have a weekend off, a rare weekend off. And usually, Phil will try to come up with a topic, maybe. Sometimes we will avail ourselves of the chance to cover another combat sport other than MMA, or simply another promotion other than the UFC. But this week I thought we would just do a one-event episode and maybe have one that comes out to less than like an hour and 32 minutes, which seems to have become the standard lately because of all the wonderful, wonderful analysis we have to deliver, you know. So, UFC 260. Stipe Miocic, Francis Ngannou. They rematched. As so often happens, I think honestly more often at heavyweight than in any other division, the rematch flipped results, and in a very satisfying way, to be honest. I know Stipe Miocic fans will be heartbroken, of course, but you know, like if every piece of your analysis is going to be completely wrong, this is the way you want it to be. You want to be proven wrong by a genuine step up, by an advancement that you simply could not have predicted without inside knowledge. And that is absolutely what we saw from Francis Ngannou. A massive corner turn in his career, I think, was represented by this performance. I'm looking forward to breaking that one down, honestly. I think that's a big story, and it makes me very interested to think about the future with Francis Ngannou. Now, as the third African heavyweight, or the third African champion in the UFC, by the way, which is another interesting little tidbit. We also had Tyron Woodley really trying to prove something against Vicente Luque in the co-main event. I think the story of Woodley's career there kind of makes for an interesting discussion around that result. Sean O'Malley proved maybe a little something in a 3-round domination of Tomas Almeida, and some more stuff besides that. But we're mainly going to focus on this main event, I think. And Phil, I don't know. I think the theme for the entire card may be lessons learned or development, which could honestly be a theme of many episodes. But certainly, Francis Ngannou made some massive strides in this rematch with Miocic.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about this as a card of people, sort of fighting against the cage of who they'd been. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Ngannou showed that. And, you know, as we mentioned last time, it did used to be one of the major talking points about Ngannou is how much he improved from fight to fight.
Yeah.
And, you know, Ryan pointed out he might have improved, but we can't tell.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't needed to do anything but go nuts. So I think, this performance, I mean, you know, we called out that if Ngannou has a fight where he works jabs and low kicks, that will be really hard for Stipe.
Yeah.
And it really was.
It really was.
This was one of the ones that without that kind of thing, you couldn't have seen it happening. The narratives were basically, Ngannou early, Stipe late. But this was not just a sort of knockdown and bludgeoning. This was this was kind of a dismantling.
Yeah. Honestly, he dominated the champion. What was Stipe Miocic's best moment? It was literally a split second before being knocked out.
Yep.
Was his best moment of the fight.
Yeah, it was when he was rocked and just swinging back as hard as he could.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I still think, we said we got the analysis completely wrong, but I still think a lot of the things we were thinking about just like rang out in this fight. Like, Stipe was still petrified to jab with Ngannou. And it does just seem to be like a really common theme. I mean, admittedly, Francis was kind of going for like the long right to the body. He was going for his own low kicks. I don't know if Stipe thought he could brace and get inside, but Stipe looked very dedicated to the counter.
Yes. And
he could not find it because Francis wasn't giving him any insane shit to counter. He wasn't doing any, he wasn't doing any mad slam dancing blitzes into the cage. He was just throwing away jabs into right hands or doing low kicks.
Yeah, for Miocic's part, and I think we could probably get that out of the way because certainly most of what we're going to have to say here has to do with Ngannou. I think this may be an example of a dynamic we often see, which is that the winner of a previous fight does not have the same benefit of the loser, of having learned what they need to change. And this really looked to me like a Stipe Miocic whose mind was much like mine, expecting Ngannou to come in and, slam dance and blow his wad and get out-wrestled and outboxed down the stretch. And as we noted last week, it was the counters that began that. It was when he started to find counters, when he started to answer Ngannou's jab and interrupt the combinations that were supposed to come behind it, that he started to kind of worm his way into the previous fight. And everything up to that point was defense, more or less. And it looked like he came in expecting the same, just as I was expecting, knowing no other kind of Ngannou fight, the same kind of fight. And apparently didn't have a plan B. Is that how it looked to you?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the things to be worried about with Stipe, right? Is that I think I saw Sean Humes on Twitter saying something similar, is that Stipe does have fight IQ, but it comes and goes.
It really does.
And after the Cormier trilogy, I was not convinced that Stipe would be out there fighting like the best fight.
Right.
I don't know if he's been doing that for a bit.
Even when he was fighting that kind of fight, like when he was opportunistically outfighting and evading people, it was like a here and then kind of thing. He's just always been, you can call it adaptability, but it's I don't know, maybe a limited form. Is Stipe one of those fighters who has to be prepared ahead of time with his like specific game plan and then can't adjust on the fly? Is he a Ruben Olivares or that's always my go-to example, but how good is Stipe at adjusting? Because honestly, I'm thinking back now and nothing really jumps out in my mind.
In the second Cormier fight, of course. Is
hard won, that adjustment.
Yeah. And not like a Galaxy Brain one either.
Yeah.
Like, hit the giant Pillsbury Doughboy man in his belly is not the world's, like, most difficult adjustment to come up with, but he did come up with it.
Right. Or stumbled upon it at the very least.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think he's probably a combination of, like someone who can be trained into an approach and someone who can make adjustments on the fly. Mm-hmm. But he's definitely not close to being top shelf in either one of these.
Yeah. Well, Ngannou then. I mean, that's the more interesting side of this. Ngannou was the one who made the massive strides. I don't know how to run down like the laundry list. What's the best summation of what Ngannou did that he hasn't done before? I've heard a few people mention, just composure as a single word answer. Like, he was composed, and we have arguably never seen that once before from Ngannou in the octagon.
we've seen patience.
Well, not necessarily, as we may get into when we start discussing Tyron Woodley. Not necessarily the same thing as composure.
Yeah.
We saw a very comfortable, confident Francis Ngannou. I think maybe the word I would use, to borrow from our mutual nemesis, Zane Simon, is process. Ngannou trusted in a process. And I think more than like any kind of individual technique or anything, because there were a lot of little form errors in there, but he had the right ideas and the right connections between ideas. It was a very responsible performance, like really mature. These are the words that keep coming to mind.
It was an A leads to B leads to C performance, not performance where everything has to everything leads to the same detonation point, where it's just I need to do a punch that will kill him. It was like you can knock people out quite handily. You don't need to hit them with your hardest punch.
That was a huge
You can use your lighter punches and even your kicks to drive them into the hard punches.
That was a huge, and even the light punches are hard punches. You're Francis fucking Ngannou. That was a huge thing to me. Like Ngannou, this performance, he realized, oh, I'm one of the hardest hitters on the planet. I actually almost never have to throw what feels to me like a hard punch. He just put his hands out there. I mean, we saw that very clearly in the first fight with Miocic, which we mentioned last week, when the one sequence where Miocic had Ngannou a little hurt, and Ngannou threw like a completely powerless, unrooted counter right hand. Really a pushing punch even by his standards, and it almost tore Miocic's head off. So he does not need to load up or throw himself around, and it made him look a hell of a lot faster too. Putting his combinations together. He was not throwing himself off balance. Another thing I noticed was that, and this is part of the process thing. Somebody on Twitter said to me, he's still wide open to being countered. And I would argue he was a lot less counterable than he has ever been. And we always have to speak relatively, right? It's heavyweight. Again, there were all kinds of mistakes in footwork and positioning and balance and so on and so forth. And certainly when he threw, he did still occasionally really load up. And when he loads up, he tends to, just like start clipping, basically like a glitching video game character. Like he just starts morphing, around the cage and falling completely off balance and changing shape, because the force of his punch is so powerful. But he timed those moments really intelligently. Again, this comes down to trusting in a process. Most of the time that Ngannou really unloaded on a hard shot, he had already gotten Miocic moving. Like Barboza style. He had gotten him committing to his footwork, and on a couple of occasions caught him. We're talking about Ngannou's technique not being perfect. He repeatedly caught Miocic with his feet crossed, getting into a bad position. The big knockdown in round 2 was in part a result of that. But I think this also speaks to another major feature of this performance from Ngannou, which were feints. It wasn't the Derek Lewis fight, Phil. He didn't just watch and wait. He created opportunities. He was so proactive, but not insanely aggressive. Like he walked that fucking line. I can't tell you how pleased and impressed I am. I honestly was starting to think he couldn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, this is, like one of the best results for a incredibly gifted athlete that you could hope for, because there still totally are universes where he came out and he just threw bombs at Miocic and knocked him out.
Oh yeah.
Like those totally exist.
Yeah.
But this one you can really see he's looking like a well put together fighter, and you can't necessarily expect him to have the same performances that he had before should he end up fighting Derek Lewis. I mean, I think in some ways, I still think, I've always thought that range strikers, diverse range strikers, are going to be more of a problem for Ngannou's style than like wrestlers are. I think the idea that he's just like this guy that you can take down has always been insanely stupid, because he's just such a physical force, and he's very ready to hit anyone who closes space with him.
Yeah, and my God, 1 second spent underneath him is so deadly.
Yes. I think Garn and Lewis are still probably pretty intriguing matchups, even if he's figuring out how to build from things like jabs and low kicks and so on. But yeah, like the wrestling in this, Ryan pointed it out, is looking like it's better. It was better.
It was.
Miocic got in on his favorite single leg, and Ngannou, initially looked like he was gonna just sort of try and headlock him and go down. Switched to the underhook, turned it into a sprawl, and then beat the shit out of Stipe. Yeah,
spun to his back really well too. I almost wondered if there was a deterioration in Miocic's wrestling visible in that exchange. He got in on that single. Ngannou maintained his balance. I mean, something he already did better than a lot of heavyweights, like bouncing around on one leg, by virtue of being such a great athlete. And then sprawls, and then now, I'm going to give Miocic the benefit of the doubt. Like he's sprawled underneath a very big man, a fighter who outweighed him by, 30 pounds or something like that, and probably much more, to be honest, because I think Ngannou cuts to make 265. But he didn't even he got sprawled on. He lost the legs. He didn't even have like a tenuous grasp on one leg. And then, granted, this is a lot of weight bearing down on him that allowed Ngannou to do the spin to the back. But Miocic was he looked very surprised by that. I imagine he probably was. But there was actually a second layer to Ngannou's wrestling. Phil, did you notice at one point that it was this close to being the classic MMA fighter error when Ngannou went for a takedown of his own after?
No.
Oh, it was very brief. It was brief, and he let go of it, which I think, again, it really speaks to that growth and maturity. But in that exchange, he sprawled, he spun to Stipe's back, he hit him with some of the most terrifying short-range punches you'll ever see, and then dropped for a double. So there's a possibility.
Yes, the old I'm in wrestling training.
Yes,
that's what we do. We wrestle with each other moment.
Yes. I've learned to wrestle now, so now I'm going to flip the wrestling switch and do wrestling things. But to his credit, Miocic did a short sprawl of his own and hopped out of that attempt. And Ngannou didn't force the issue or anything. He went right back to comfortably striking at a nice, slow, controlled pace. So I don't know. There may have been a thing where Miocic just was not ready for Ngannou to actually have any kind of second layer to his wrestling. But still, I would have liked to see a wrestler of Miocic's quality, do something to stop somebody just spinning to his back and smashing his head. You got to think it wasn't the first time he's ever been sprawled on, right? No?
Yeah, I think it was just a very terrifying moment for him, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, he got hurt, by pretty much every strike Francis hit him with in this fight, I think.
Ngannou hit the body. He worked the legs. He through combinations with, again, layers to them. He double jabbed to close the distance, then feinted the jab to the body to set up the overhand, the JDS classic, an enduringly effective combination. Body jab to overhand right. And, there was even some nifty, like, thinking past the first punch in the finishing sequence too. Miocic was like trying to be more active. He started to drift away to Ngannou's left. And not only did Ngannou cut that movement off, he took a step to to precede Miocic's movement, and then throw a right hand. It was a fake right hand. It was just to blind Miocic so he could then shift and land like a left cross, or like a power left jab with a little added shift for oomph. Really well placed. He essentially walked Miocic right into it and set it up. Stipe didn't see it coming. That's why it hurt so much more than the visibly much harder punch that hit him in the first round. And then still stayed composed. I'm not going to critique the guy too much for, literally the only shot he ate in the entire fight, I think, other than maybe a kick here or there, was walking into a right hand while going for the kill. He had Miocic badly hurt. He was going for the finish, walks into a shot, and then immediately he flipped the switch off and went back to patience. Granted, it was only a second of patience because Miocic had the same response to landing clean on his opponent and ran into just a really efficient left hook. This is the way I'll say it. That left hook against Rosenstruik, Phil, that I kept giggling at under my breath throughout last week's episode, redeemed. Okay? That left hook that he knocked Miocic out with. I'll never talk about the Rosenstruik fight again, Francis. You have my word. Very impressive.
The one that he got countered, the actual one that he got countered on, that was pure Duffy. When he was charging.
Oh yeah. Yes.
That was a pure Duff punch.
Oh yeah. Ngannou Classic is still in there. He's never going away.
Yeah.
This man still has like a destroyer of worlds in his chest, but yeah, I'm not going to fault him for bringing it out at that particular moment. And I admire the fact that he was able to, for all I can tell, like turn it back off as needed. That to me is massive. So I'm very excited for Ngannou as champion. Just before we wrap this up, let's prognosticate a little bit about his potential future fights. You mentioned Derek Lewis. John Jones is the other top option. Do you have any thoughts on those?
Like the John Jones fight, you got to assume it would just be an ugly destruction, right? At this point.
Of John Jones?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't even want to see John Jones at heavyweight. I mean, I guess I would enjoy seeing him get destroyed, but.
No, I'm not really that engaged with it either.
Yeah.
I think it would probably be a fight where Ngannou beat remaining traits out of John Jones, like his confidence and his durability, be like a Ferguson Gaethje type thing. But yeah, I don't really want to see it. I think it would be a bit of an execution. And it's just that in many ways, it would be, makes it sound as though I don't want it because I like John Jones and I want good things for him. I don't like John Jones. But it would also be one of those fights where he could take it and then he would lose. And he'd be like, well, I was undefeated, then I took a risk and I challenged the baddest man on the planet. And, it's sort of one of those, apart from the obvious fact that it would be incredibly physically damaging, it wouldn't damage his legacy too much to lose to Ngannou.
No, I don't think so.
But it would damage his legacy to lose to Jan Blachowicz.
Yes.
And it probably should have damaged his legacy to lose to Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos.
Yes, and it has. All right, I will not let anyone forget. It has. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly think John Jones watched that. He was literally having a Twitter meltdown. just from having seen this fight. Like, I think John Jones wants, I think John Jones going to heavyweight is like Tyron Woodley coming forward and throwing combos. May it happen? Sure. It is within the realm of human possibility. But, I think he wants nothing less, to be honest. I have thought that for some time. Jones has talked about going heavyweight for years. And I just think he doesn't want to. He does not want to be physically outmatched.
Yeah, I think I've always suspected that like how much he's talked about wanting to go to heavyweight has been dictated by how well he's doing against the like heavyweights in his gym.
Sure.
Like back when Arlovsky and so on were at Jackson Wink, he was pretty vocal about it. I was like, yeah, those guys maybe not the best heavyweights around.
He was with Travis Brown and Andre Arlovsky and
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I tend to agree. And this is the unfortunate thing is that there's no way to avoid ugly narratives in this one because, on the one hand, I don't think Jones wants to go to heavyweight. On the other hand, if he's asking for more money, the UFC should certainly give it to him. He definitely deserves more for a fight of that caliber, despite, what you might think of him as a person. He certainly deserves to be paid for taking that risk. For doing something that he probably doesn't want to do.
What I think of John Jones as a person is far outweighed by what I think of Dana White as a person anyway.
Yep.
What does it matter?
But yeah, I mean, I do suspect that there's a solid chance that the UFC and John Jones will not be able to come to a agreement on this fight because Jones doesn't really want it that much, and the UFC doesn't want to pay him.
Right. I mean, it'll come to a point where it'll be a factor of both parties not really wanting it enough for the cost. I mean, it'll be the price will be the barrier.
And the UFC has shown it has no issue with throwing Derek Lewis into title fights because he's there.
So what do you think about that one? I mean, as hilarious as it would be after this for Ngannou to just have another staring match, but for 5
I just
rounds.
want them to try and find highlights from the first one and set it to cool music.
The promotion. Wow, that is going to be good. That's the real game plan, is how to come up with a promotional package for this fight. Any thoughts very briefly?
I'm really liking the slow motion in this replay we're using, but could we maybe show a little more action? It's like, no, that's not slow motion, I'm afraid. It's just the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume I think it's still interesting. I'm still not sure if Ngannou's gonna, like, pressure someone like Lewis, who is huge and scary in the same way. And he's also gonna be dealing with more feints. But I think I would probably pick this version over him just because he'll kick Lewis's leg and hit his body.
Yes. I would absolutely pick this version. But there is still, there was a reason in the first place that the kind of freak out Ngannou had against Miocic was not the same kind of freak out he had against Derek Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because Lewis is not only bigger, which always, no matter what you say, I'm sure I brought this comparison up on the show too many times already, but there's a reason cops sit on horses, because it's intimidating. No matter what you say, being in there against someone who is either your size or bigger than you is not a comfortable feeling. And I think Ngannou was feeling that last time. The other thing is that while Miocic is certainly a considerable power puncher, Derek Lewis acts more like a power puncher. He will have the maddening patience that he had in the last fight. He hasn't lost that. And so, like, just not giving away openings, not even reacting to the feints in the same way that Miocic did, but being ready at any moment to throw the hardest punch he possibly can in return. I think we may still get a much slower performance out of Ngannou, as he has to try to kind of, Derek Lewis doesn't show you as much. He keeps it back, and that can make it a lot more difficult to time his explosions. Yeah,
I mean, I think the really interesting one is down the road. I think it's Gane.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think that's the one which I'm genuinely pretty curious about, but it's obviously probably a good 2 years away.
I would think so. Ideally, honestly, I would like to see Gon develop. I think Ngannou can pretty safely hold on to the title for that time. What's that, 2 more defenses? Who else is there anyway? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap it up there. That's half an hour, so we've already broken our promise. But good news, folks. Not a whole lot on the rest of this card. Though we will still continue our theme of people, adjusting to circumstance. Or how did you put it before, Phil? People
fighting against the cages of who they are in a moment of particular pretentiousness.
That's right. Well, I think I've already got you beat just over the course of this first segment with my own turns of phrase. I've been watching Deadwood, Phil. It's ruined the way I talk.
Hell yes.
It's pretty cool, though. We'll be back after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are moving on to the co-main event, which was supposed to be Gregor Gillespie versus Brad Riddell. We really enjoyed talking about that one. I enjoyed having you change my mind on it, Phil, and then it went away. It left us.
Was that meant to be on this card?
Oh wait, no, it was a different one.
Card.
It was a different one. Sorry, we've lost so
this
many.
was meant to be Volkanovski Ortega.
Oh, it's so much better.
The most interesting fight on this card.
So much better. I feel like a fool. Yeah. So much better than Riddell Gillespie. Also, so much better than any other fight on this card.
Yep.
Oh, that hurt to remember. Fuck you, Phil.
Seeing as we made an entire gag about it last episode, I thought you might remember, but no.
But you may recall one of the major aspects of that gag was me repeatedly forgetting it. And
Indeed.
And Ryan being smart enough to keep it going. So, true to form.
Jesus.
But yeah, we lost.
You've got to rely on Ryan to keep things going.
Well.
Yeah.
Luque Woodley was the fight instead. Please give me your thoughts, Mr. McKenzie.
I mean, this was both less and more sad than the traditional Tyron Woodley fight.
Yes.
That we've grown to expect. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's a fight that he can be more proud of.
Absolutely.
He's trying to be more proud of.
100%.
And, we've sort of banged this drum a bit, but it's extremely hard for people to change who they are.
Yeah.
And for Woodley to come out and just go balls to the wall, charge at Vicente Luque and just basically keep swinging with him until he went down must have required a unfathomable amount of willpower.
It must have been like childbirth. And I'm only partially joking. Like, that he looked profoundly uncomfortable the entire time, but he stuck to it. Perhaps it was almost a favor to him that Luque finished him, because he only had to stick to it long enough to get cleanly finished rather than just enduring 15 minutes of slow punishment.
But even after he got hurt,
I
was expecting him to revert back to Woodley, revert back to prime Woodley.
He went down in a hail of bullets.
Yeah, but he kept swinging, he kept trying, and it's just the fact that I think there's even when he got hit, you could definitely see there was a big oh no, this is exactly what I've always feared.
Yes.
No, I have to keep going kind of thing. And, the desperation just kind of cranked up a notch. Whereas when Luque was hurt, he just pretty much, you could tell he was just like, oh, I'm I'm Vicente Luque.
That's the thing that happens.
It's punching time. Like,
Yeah.
he was not even slightly thinking, oh no, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, I think it probably had something to do with the different degree to which they were hurt by each other's shots. Like Woodley, in that instant before getting hit and feeling the shot about to connect, was like the tensest man on the planet. I mean, he was already going to be very tense because he was demanding of himself to come forward and trade punches, completely against his nature. So he was just tense the whole time. Luque had the relaxation of a man who was doing what he was comfortable doing. And, yeah, we talk all the time about, like your perspective of the fight enabling you to take certain things in stride or not. And for Luque, getting hit with even a Tyron Woodley right hand is not, psychologically a defeat, because it's just part of, fighting his fight.
Yep. I mean, yeah, so he's been through wars, he's survived wars. I think it is possible to break Luque down because we've seen people do that.
Sure.
But the route to that was not available to Woodley because he couldn't out-wrestle Vicente Luque.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because aside from there was honestly, if you're a Tyron Woodley fan, as I am, I would like to see the man do well and go out on a win. That would be great. Then there certainly was something very romantic about losing like this.
Mm-hmm.
That certainly feels better, at least more cathartic. There was no catharsis in the previous 3 losses. That's the really shitty part about them. There was no moment to say like, well, you did your best. Clearly he hadn't been doing his best, and that's why he was losing. So that felt great. But in terms of application, was this the right path? I wrote an article last week, the title of which pretty much gives you the premise, which was Tyron Woodley's coaches cannot ask him to do the impossible. And this kind of was the impossible. So in a sense, they proved my ass wrong. But in another sense, I think we saw pretty clearly, like, A, it took 15 rounds of relentless punishment for Tyron Woodley to finally reach a point where he could make himself do that which was like completely, poisonous to like who he is as a fighter, which is to come forward and press the issue and trade punches. 15 rounds he was willing to lose before he finally reached the point. So essentially you had to get your fighter to the MMA career equivalent of like an addict's fucking rock bottom in order to get him to do this thing. And it didn't work. In fact, you might argue, as wonderful and cathartic as it was in its own way, it was the worst way to try to fight Vicente Luque. I mean, other than perhaps, I guess, just sitting against the fence and doing nothing, which again, I'll take this over that. And I'm sure Tyron will as well. But trading punches with Vicente Luque? You mentioned before we started, Phil, Leon Edwards out-wrestled Vicente Luque pretty soundly. Is there no possibility that Tyron's people could have leaned into a game plan of that sort and gotten similar results? I have to think they could.
I mean, that's the thing. That's the problem. One of the things we mentioned is that Woodley hasn't hurt anyone for a while.
Yeah.
Usman isn't invulnerable to people just cross-countering him as he walks up to them, right, as Burns showed. Like, what if Woodley just can't do that kind of stuff anymore? I mean, he's 40 years old.
He's 38.
He looks incredibly ripped.
But yeah.
Is he?
38, yeah.
Yeah.
But it is something that I have essentially not mentioned throughout the last week of Tyron Woodley discussions that has to be mentioned. He's old. So that's part of it too.
He's been fighting for how long? About 11 years?
Pro
12?
debut in 2009.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
over 12 years now.
I mean, he went for double legs against Luque that just weren't there. He just got forced up the body immediately and ended up in a weird, in a high, a high clinch until Luque dug underhooks and turned him off.
I thought that was a workable look, though. Do clinch wrestling, you know? Guy's gonna be walking right towards you with his hands up. Just get underhooks and keep trying for that. Woodley didn't have any, like, this has kind of been, his issues have kind of been like across phases the whole time. It's not just that coming forward and putting punches together is very difficult for him. Wrestling in layers seems to be pretty difficult for him too. Woodley is just not comfortable enough in a fight, historically to like advance through a step, sort of, you know, like advance through the steps of a layered attack.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like he wasn't, you know, his right hand is always, you know, meant to be thrown as a counterpunch.
Yeah.
And him leaning on it as an offensive tool shows how badly he can get thrown out of position when he's doing it.
Yeah.
And we saw that when he got countered. I think the same is almost certainly true of a lot of his wrestling as well. Is that he, you know, if his opponent's hips are already back, then, you know, even his double leg is just not going to have the same effect.
Yep.
If he's just trying to work his takedown in open space, like we saw what happened. He shot for Luque's hips. Luque pushed his hips back, and then that was pretty much the end of it. They just ended up in a clinch against the fence.
Yeah. I kind of would have liked to have seen that be like the big investment. But honestly, I'm not sure that there wasn't any like technical development behind this. It was, as I think Woodley has always conceptualized it himself, it was a psychological hurdle he wanted to get over. And you know, I think, I don't know. I think as much as he did the thing he did the thing and had better results doing it, that I pretty strongly said they should stop trying to get him to do. Because let's be clear, like, as I mentioned in my article, the whole come forward, throw punches, attack has been the message from the corner for, again, 15 lost rounds in a row. They have been asking him to do that the whole time, and he has not been able to. So on the one hand, yeah, like he managed to do that and had some better results. But on the other hand, like, I don't know.
I think you can't expect too much from him.
No, you're right.
We're at a point where there's a conflation between physical and mental deterioration that's never gonna go away. And this is the Rashad Evans point, you know, where he started losing a clear decision to Dan Kelly.
Right.
And you were just like, oh, right, yeah, no, I get it.
It's more a sympathy for Woodley than anything that makes me feel this way, I think. I would like to see, I feel he deserves a good, like, last step for a going out performance. The things that you read, to me before, do you still have that headline or that quote available? I think that really bespeaks, like, the sort of, the mental element.
Yeah, I think I do. It was when Woodley said,
this is after the fight.
I don't regret my aggression, as that's what God created me to do. I don't think God created Tyron Woodley to be aggressive.
I mean, if he did, then Tyron Woodley has been has been making God angry his entire life up to this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, like, that really nails it home that, like, what Tyron Woodley wanted out of this fight was to fucking prove something. And that was also sort of part of my write-up. Like, I think his entire career, Tyron Woodley has really been trying to prove something. I think the reason he, like, got better at striking in the first place was largely driven by a desire to show that he could get better at it, because he didn't like how much he hated it at first. He didn't like how much he hated getting hit and how nervous and anxious it made him. So he wanted to prove that he could get comfortable doing this. And, I think again, here he just wanted to prove something. And I think that was all he really cared about in this performance, to be honest. I think he hit a sort of emotional rock bottom. But credit to him, you know, he tried something different. He tried something very much against his type, and it almost worked.
He took a fight against an incredibly dangerous opponent.
Absolutely.
And now we have potentially two of the things which welterweight actually needs, which are potentially Brazilians who will fight anyone.
Dear God, send us Brazilians who will fight anyone.
Yeah, that's what welterweight has thrived on. It's the only way anyone can get to title shots.
Oh my God.
In the past.
Yeah.
It's the whole reason why we're having to deal with Masvidal Covington 2 is the dearth of Brazilians who will fight anyone. Without Maia and RDA, one else just sits there and goes like, well, I'm not fighting anyone ranked below me. And the person directly above them goes, well, I'm not fighting anyone ranked below me. And yeah. And meanwhile, Maia and RDA would just be like, yeah, sure, I'll take that fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully Burns and Luque, two members of Team Evil.
Of course.
Good members.
You know what that means. They're just going to have to fight each other.
No, I mean, they're too valuable to do that with.
You think so?
You never got RDA Maia. You have to use them for anyone who looks like a potential contender.
That's true. And as far as Brazilians who will fight anyone go, you could do a lot worse than Vicente Luque. I would watch him fight essentially anyone.
Man is guaranteed fire.
Yep. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, Sean O'Malley, passed a test for which he may have been given some of the answers in advance against Tomas Almeida. Open book quiz, but he did well enough. And we had some light heavyweight. Well, technically, I now noticed that there was in fact a catchweight in the featured prelim, which was,
it only makes it better.
Yeah, and you can tell this is a featured prelim when I read you the following names: Alonzo Menefield and Fabio Chirant.
Oh yeah, I love both those guys.
Feature. The word feature is just radiating off of those names. And Michael Oleksiejczuk, or Michal, I think it's supposed to be. Oleksiejczuk fought, my Lord and Savior, Modestas Bukauskas. And, I think we'll have a little bit of discussion for the continuing okayification of light heavyweight, after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are continuing through the undercard of UFC 260. Gonna make it nice and quick. You know what that means, Phil.
Yep.
Sean O'Malley.
We are.
Yeah? You did know what
we
that
are going
meant.
to talk for far too long.
No, we're not. We're actually going to be quick. All right? And if I'm wrong,
okay,
kill me. Sean O'Malley versus Tomas Almeida. As I said, open book test, right? I think even more so in retrospect, this looks like one that was just designed for O'Malley to get not an absolute heavy bag, but close enough for him to get back on track after the loss to Chito Vera and the injuries that came along with it and after it. Initial thoughts on his performance? Almeida sort of got stuck in middle distance a lot, as Ryan Wagner very astutely said that he would. And, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, Thomas Almeida doesn't have range weapons.
Yeah.
And everyone he's hurt or gone up against, everyone he's hurt or done well against, it's been because he's got them stuck into a pocket war with him.
Yep.
And as such, he was a really good style matchup for Sean O'Malley. I mean, the main thing was, what if O'Malley fades out of the fight because Almeida is a buzzsaw late in fights.
Yep.
If he gets in on you, he's still extremely dangerous. But, I mean, in part, I think, so there's two things. In part, O'Malley did a much better job of staying controlled despite his idiotic attempt at a walk-off KO in the first round. He did a much better job of just not tiring himself out with his own offense and with minor amounts of pushback. Also, I do feel like Almeida is not quite the same guy that he used to be.
No, I don't think so.
That's 2 straight fights where he's gone into the 3rd round and you're like, well, you really need to knock this guy out now.
Yeah.
It would be a good time to really bring out those body shots and stuff. And he just looks like the same guy.
And not
maybe a touch more aggressive.
Honestly, and was he even, I think he was probably most aggressive in the 2nd round of this fight.
Yeah. I think he was going for it when he got knocked out.
True. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so then you're talking about someone who's kind of foot slow, kind of fragile, and who doesn't even have the benefit of being like a murderous 3rd round fighter.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, this is another matchup for O'Malley. I mean, all of his matchups recently have been against, I think, they've all been against like decent matchups for him. Primarily, they are foot slow strikers without much of a defined pressure game. And the same is true of Chito as it is for Eddie Wineland and it is for Thomas Almeida. He's one of them as well, but what he has is like brutal, dogged toughness.
Yeah, fearlessness.
That the other 2 don't have.
Durability for days. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, it's a B-, I think, for O'Malley. He's shown that he can go 3 rounds in a cruise.
Yes.
Against someone that he's outstriking like 3-1.
Yep. I think you hit all the marks there. I mean, yeah, you had something else.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, they're going to have to try and figure out ways to give him more foot slow strikers without pressure games, or he's going to have to start fighting someone a bit more challenging at some point. Yeah.
To his credit, though, aside from the part of the 1st round where he may have in fact given it away, he didn't give it away down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
He mostly stayed disciplined. As you said, a fight where he was in command is maybe not the same kind of test, but I think you could argue that like against Terrion Ware, one of the shitty 3rd rounds we mentioned last week, that he sort of let Ware into the fight. In a way, he took his foot off the gas some, and he certainly didn't do that here. There were moments. I would say he really tried to turn it on. If I recall correctly, like 2/3 of the way through round 2, he really tried to do like classic Anderson Silva style of like just jittery, feinting offense, chasing.
Mm-hmm.
And when that didn't work, he kind of just turned everything off for a minute and let Almeida back into the fight. But, it was parceled out pretty intelligently. The more I think about it, though, the more I do kind of think that has to do with Almeida as well. Maybe that's just because I just hate Sean O'Malley, Phil. He just sucks. He's so annoying.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't look great. It was good.
It was good.
But it didn't make you think, oh my God, I've underestimated this man, future champion in the making. He's going to blow Pedro Munoz out of the water if he ever fights him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think he certainly, when in control, looks pretty fucking great, actually. Like, just in a natural way. He's accurate. He's confident. He has some layers of deception to his game. That, in fact, there were moments, I don't think we saw as much of this from him previously, where Almeida was trying to press in, and O'Malley had some nice turns and pivots off the fence. Some nice, like, halfway into the clinch to turn Almeida, and then getting back to open space. There were dicey moments still where he got backed up, but I thought he dealt with them pretty well. Again, I think a B- is about right. He was absolutely supposed to win this fight, but he wasn't lazy about winning it.
Mm-hmm.
So good look for him. What else? 2 light heavyweight fights I kind of want to talk about. I think to me they represent the platonic ideal of what light heavyweight is for. The first was a minute long. It was between 2 absurd muscle men, and it ended with a Von Flue choke. I don't even have any analysis. I just want to remind you all that happened. Alonzo Menifield fought a man no one's ever heard of. It was supposed to be William Knight, and he Von Flued him. Beautiful. That's the kind of submission that is supposed to happen, arguably only in divisions like light heavyweight and heavyweight. So glad to see that still happening. Did Menifield get Von Flued by OSP, or did he get knocked out by OSP? He got knocked out.
Yeah, I think, he got knocked out.
It would have been so cool if that last loss was a Von Flu and then he came in and just used it. The other one, though, was a boy of ours, Michal Oleksiejczuk, the other noble Pole in the light heavyweight division. He took on Modestas Bukauskas, and I have almost completely lost track of what the bit with Bukauskas is, which is okay, because honestly, he looked in this fight like a pretty good young light heavyweight. Being 27 years old, this being his, 15th, 16th fight. And Bukauskas basically had to deal with relentless pressure from Oleksiejczuk, nothing new there. And I thought this just sort of had the feel of a very well-matched fight. I actually really enjoyed this one. This would be like a great, real fight night kind of feel. Not a pay-per-view quality fight. But knowing what I was getting before I came in, having seen plenty of the results before I even started to watch the card, just as a, 18 minutes of entertainment, I quite enjoyed this one. What are your thoughts? Oleksiejczuk. We've had our eye on him. Any developments?
Not really. I mean, this looked like more of a synthesis of, who we saw outside of the UFC and who we saw in the UFC. Mm-hmm. And that he didn't go quite as nuts early and was going for much more of like a concerted pressure approach rather than just attempting to obliterate Bukauskas. Bukauskas, very good stuff to see. The bit with him, by the way, is that he is a soulless hell entity. Yeah. Based on his terrifying picture. Yeah. But in general, he did a really good job of circling the cage, pulling Oleksiejczuk onto long strikes, mixing up which direction he was going in. Mm-hmm. Very rare in the heavyweight division. Occasionally, throwing uncommon strikes like the 3-2.
And countering.
So yeah, I mean, this was a genuinely pretty decent heavyweight scrap.
I agree.
I'm not sure if I agreed with the decision, but the UFC would be stupid to cut Bukauskas off this and the loss to Jimmy Crute. They'd be stupid to cut him, and hopefully we can if they keep him on, he can get a fight against a jobber, to sort of build out his approach a bit more. Yep.
That's what he needs. I agree with all of that. Bukauskas dealt, I thought, quite well. Better than I expected, honestly, given the fact that Oleksiejczuk is a good pressure fighter. I mean, he's consistent about cutting off the cage. Honestly, he's probably one of the better people in the division, as far as consistently heading his opponent off as they're circling along the fence. Nice, efficient cage cutting there. He was also not he's not reckless. He will come in and stay right on the edge of range and make you panic to the point where you throw first, and then he'll use defense and then get inside. That's a difficult enough style of pressure to deal with on a good day. And Bukauskas had a pretty damn good day. I have no dispute with the idea of him winning the decision. I was also okay with Oleksiejczuk winning it. Very close, very well matched. Since we like Oleksiejczuk, though, I do find this fight to be a little concerning from his perspective. For example, Oleksiejczuk is a body punching guy. Since coming to the UFC, in fact, it has become more and more his thing. And when he used his body punches in this fight, they were tremendously effective. I think probably every one he attempted landed, which is certainly more than you can say for the many wayward left hands he tried to land on Bukauskas' head. And then I think he hurt him with one with a
It was
body.
in the third, yeah. Uppercut, a left uppercut to the body, I think it was.
It was. And I thought he hurt him with one actually earlier in the fight, too, that no one really noticed, where if you look at the facial expression that Bukauskas is making and the body posture, there's a moment where it's like, oh, he did not like that shot. But in the third, visibly hurt. And it was by slipping Bukauskas' right hand, which he did really well throughout the fight, and finally deciding to come back instead of with the counter left that had started to miss more and more, coming back with a counter to the body, which is something I would like to see literally every MMA fighter do more of. Countering to the body is a very good idea. And it hurt Bukauskas, and Oleksiejczuk not only didn't seem to notice, but also just having a super clean connection on this opening that presented itself over and over again, did not go back to it. Granted, there were only like 40 seconds left at that point, but it feels basically just like a stagnation from Oleksiejczuk is what I'm trying to say, if not a slight regression.
Yes, and he still looks tiny and
he is tiny.
Soft.
He is
light heavyweight.
Tiny and soft for a light. He's a peep, essentially, a marshmallow peep, and he should probably go to middleweight. Or he just needs to develop a lot more depth.
Yep.
I obviously he can succeed at light heavyweight. He's pretty quick-handed. He hits hard enough. He's aggressive. He doesn't get tired. He's durable. He has a lot of what you need, but he is little. So without like a special edge, or another step technically, he'd probably be better suited to just cut what is probably like 10 pounds of water and fight at 185, where it's all just a specialist journeyman. Seems perfect for him.
Either that, or he can fight Iwan Kutalaba.
Or he could do that, and it'd be an absolute fucking mess, and I wanna watch it tomorrow. It sounds great. All right, well, that's UFC 260 in a nutshell, and in almost less than an hour. We did pretty damn well, Phil, given our standards. Do you have anything that people need to know about before we get out of here?
I don't, although I did really enjoy that piece you mentioned about Tyron Woodley. I thought was like, as I think I mentioned on Twitter, like a surprising, like, well, maybe not surprising, but you know, it's very easy to criticize fighters, and just be like, oh yeah, they should just do this, and to sort of dismiss people who are having like real struggles. But I thought it did a very good job of kind of walking the line between like useful analysis and like actual like sympathy for someone in a tough spot.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's a stressful fucking thing, fighting. You know, people don't just make decisions willy-nilly. You can't just decide to do things with freedom. You're under a lot of duress. And yeah, I had actually kind of lost total confidence in that article by the time I was getting near finishing it at like 4 a.m. So I was very gratified to hear that people enjoyed it. And when I look back on it, I enjoyed mostly writing it as well. So go check that out. I don't have an article coming out this week that I know of, although I do have scheduled with Kyle McLaughlin an appointment to watch 2 Marvin Hagler fights and record commentary for the Patreon. We are going to watch Hagler versus Benny Briscoe, who is a sort of boxing Joe Benavidez in that he's one of the best to never win a title in his division. Early fight of Hagler's. And then we're going to watch probably Hagler's finest overall performance, Hagler versus Tony Sibson. And we're going to do commentary on both of those. So make sure you subscribe to the Heavy Hands Patreon. $3 a month is all it costs to get access to those and all of our other bonus episodes. Which means I should mention, we also have a heavy bag, an hour-long question and answer segment, the heavy bag, which should be up on the Patreon by the time you hear this episode. So make sure you go check that out as well. Likewise, $3 a month. We appreciate you supporting the show, and we haven't put out a shitload of bonus content, so make sure you hop on that Patreon before, I don't know, Phil dies or something.
Hey.
You never know.
Not that old.
Well, you're as old as Tyron Woodley.
Jesus.
45, I think, as you recall. All you need to do, Phil, is just prove that you can go down swinging, okay?
One of these days. One of these days, you're going to come out, you're going to start talking shit, and I'm just going to come out with just an explosion of desperate insults. until I get incredibly tired and pass out.
And just start crying and
on my
asleep.
desk. Yeah.
I can't wait. I really am looking forward.
At least I'll know that I finally fought back.
You will have proven to me that you did that thing. All right. Well, thanks very much for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. Find Phil on Twitter at EvilGregJackson. Find me at BoxingBush, BUSCH. Check out the aforementioned article on Bloody Elbow. Check out our Patreon once again. And finally, thank you all so much for listening. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.